Welcome back. I'm really excited for today's conversation. I hope y'all are having an amazing week. Today, I'm speaking to Dr. Melanie Rieback. She is a visionary entrepreneur, technologist, and an advocate for open source security and ethical business practices. As the co-founder and CEO of Radically Open Security, the world's first nonprofit computer security consultancy, she has redefined the landscape of cybersecurity by integrating transparency, ethical hacking, and social responsibility into the industry. Her innovative approach to business aligns technology with societal good, setting an example for future enterprises. How are you doing today?
Good. I'm on your podcast.
Yeah, I mean, we were just talking earlier. I think one of the most special moments I had at Kaleido was this dinner where it was me, you, and Tamar, who is we spoke to on the podcast a few episodes ago. And we ended up just chatting for hours. And I couldn't even tell you what it was about, but I just remember it was a conversation that had spanned so many amazing topics. And I felt very present in that moment to just be connecting with people from all over the world who had these really different perspectives on the world. And so I really appreciated that. And I was so excited to have you on and to get to have this conversation. How did you find yourself at Kaleido? I know you said this was your second year. How did you end up presenting?
Yeah, it was indeed the second year that I was there. How they found me the first time, I'm not entirely sure. It's entirely possible they could have heard me speak elsewhere. I speak a lot. But this was the second time. So the first time I gave a presentation, second time I did a longer workshop, and Kaleido's wonderful. It's a very special event.
Hmm. I'm actually so excited for today's conversation because I feel like there's a lot of personal questions I'm excited to get in there because I think I'm recently started to set up my own business and I've been having to rethink a lot of what my relationship looks like with the people that work for me. And I'm like, how can I re-envision this rather than what I'm typically exposed to when it comes to business? And so I think I'm really excited for this conversation. So I guess I want to start all the way back from where it all began. So where did you grow up and how did you first get experienced and exposed to the world of technology and tech?
Yeah. I grew up in the United States, in South Florida. How did I get exposed to tech? Through my parents. My mom was a C programmer. My dad was a telecommunications hardware engineer. In that sense, I guess I got it at quite a young age. I can remember back in the day. Playing with their 8088 with a 300 baud modem, you know, and getting started with programming GW Basic and all that. I don't know if you're you're probably too young to remember all that, but
Mm-mm.
in that
Those, yeah,
case,
those every word that you just said right now makes no sense to me, but
yeah,
I can get the gist.
the older people in your audience will recognize these things. So I kind of got a love of computers, I think, from my parents. Of course, it took me a while to really figure out what I wanted to do. My parents worked in computers, so of course, as a teenager, I wanted to do anything that they weren't doing. So I originally studied, I was a pre-medical student when I did my bachelor's and was working towards a bachelor's in biology. It was only part of the way through the study that I took my first sort of core elective as I should say a core class on computer science. And I realized, hey, this is actually really fun and I can get credit points for doing this. So then I added a second major, which was computer science then. And of course, when you combine biology and computer science, what do you get? You get bioinformatics. So I did my bachelor's thesis in molecular modeling. I also did a summer internship in proteomics. And then after I graduated with my bachelor's, I could have gone on to medical school, but it didn't feel right. So instead, I took a year and a half out to go work on the Human Genome Project at MIT. And that was around 2001. So it was right in the middle of the big genome sequencing race between the public effort which I was part of, and Celera Genomics. So it was a very interesting time.
Wow. Something that I've been thinking about a lot recently is it seems that in every decade there's this new technology that seems to captivate people, and it seems to be like, all right, this is what is happening at this current moment, and this is what's going to change the face of the universe. And there's a lot of people who are, fully investing in it, hypothesizing how it's going to turn out. And as of right now, it's clearly the landscape of AI. Do you remember when you were coming into the space, into the field, what it was? What was the craze that people were like, this is insane?
I think technology has hype cycles. So, I mean, this is far from the first hype cycle of AI. I mean, I think AI has had hype cycles since the 1980s. And I just think that the big difference now is just that computing is faster and the training sets of data are larger. But of course, things have been moving in this direction for quite some time now. We'll also see how long this specific hype cycle lasts. Just because, I mean, the amount of capital that's getting burned right now on creating training data sets. Well, I mean, basically creating training models for the LLMs. Yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, I think that what really changed right now is just that they made consumer products out of it. Whereas previously, I mean, most of the AI was either on the server side behind the scenes, or it was stuff that was still maybe a little bit hokey, like, Eliza, that was also, I think, from the 80s or 90s. Yeah, clearly it's getting better. But at the same time, it still needs to yeah, be sustainable. The other thing also is people are creating so much AI generated crap now that that's also going back into the data sets that it's being used to that's being used to train the LLMs. So I'm also sort of curious what's going to happen as we continue to get degradation of the data sets. Also, of course, you have hackers that are deliberately injecting toxic stuff into the data sets to introduce vulnerabilities. Of course, now there's sort of battles over, bias in the data sets. I mean, you have Elon Musk also creating his XAI, where he's trying to create some kind of anti-woke LLM. I don't think it succeeded yet, by the way, but it is what he's trying to do. Versus, of course, OpenAI and Anthropic and some of the others that are just, I guess, embracing the left wing bias. So, yeah, I mean, it's certainly interesting times, but again, we're in an AI bubble at the moment. It'll burst at some point, and usually the truth is somewhere in the middle.
Mm. Do you remember what the bubble was when you were entering the tech landscape?
Well, gosh, I mean, you're asking me now to remember what was going on, and I mean, because started, I started using computers when I was like 10 or something. So it's really hard for me to remember
Mm.
at the time. I mean, I don't think it was as bubblish back then because it was before the internet. I mean, because when I first got started, there were bulletin board systems, and we used to sort of have mostly text-based logins into the different systems. So, I mean, it wasn't as hyped as it was now. There were still just sort of like geeky not normal, definitely not normal, but there were definitely like geeky sort of well-meaning people who were mostly on it. And yeah, the World Wide Web actually didn't exist yet. So, I mean, there might have been a hype cycle, but I think it was more, it was around the time where they were creating DARPANet, and they were basically just doing it for communication resilience in the face of war. But of course, eventually you started getting graphical user interfaces for it. Of course, AOL came and went, Prodigy came and went, CompuServe came and went. And eventually, I mean, when I started using computers, there was MS-DOS. Then, of course, gradually we got Windows, which sucked at the very beginning. That gradually started getting better. You got the first few browsers. I mean, it all started really as just a very slow toy. And it gradually evolved into what it is now. So I mean, I'm, you know, And when I was in college, I mean, I graduated in 2000. So, yeah, I mean, maybe the hype cycles were that, for the first time, they were creating computer science departments instead of sort of integrated math and computer science departments that they'd had. So,
Hmm.
this was a
Wow.
different time. So it's kind of hard to describe.
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating when you lay that down, how much and how quickly things have changed in the rapidity. I mean, I was born in 1998, but I wasn't fully conscious to really remember those first, 5 or 6 years. But I mean, it's just, I think it's really interesting. I grew up in the Bay Area, and a lot of people, I think, who are outside looking in at a lot of people who work in the tech space, I think oftentimes that entire industry can feel so cold, I think sometimes, where it's like the motivations of why people do what they do is really hard to understand. So I'm really curious to kind of get into what you've noticed working in the tech industry for so long about what do you think it is that drives people to keep innovating, to keep being like, all right, we need to come up with the next biggest thing, the next unicorn endlessly? Because I think it's one of those industries that churns out these massive innovations at such a quick pace that I'm always fascinated. What is it that people are so driven?
I mean,
What is it that motivates them? I think.
I think that changed over time. I mean, because I think the original innovations from the Silicon Valley, things like the semiconductor, were amazing. you know, I mean, and also just thinking about some of those original companies coming out of those tech garages. I mean, of course, there's all kinds of legacy and lore in Silicon Valley, which any technologist has to appreciate. I mean, of course, the HP garage and and it's very impressive. I mean, even, the early glory days of some of the big tech companies like, Google. I mean, it must have really been quite a thing back in the early days. But the problem, though, is nowadays, I mean, it's really all about capital. And I think in a way the ecosystem, I mean, now it's just kind of deranged. I mean, that's just sort of the way that I personally view it. I no longer view it so much as a kind of tech Walhalla as much as I just see a bunch of venture capitalists that are trying to pump as much of other people's money, into these projects, sort of with the hope that they can grow it and then sort of flip it onto the public markets or through some kind of acquisition. The intentions aren't that pure anymore. And a lot of people who go to the Bay Area, they go there because they want to become billionaires, right? I mean, because they see what happens with some of these other tech founders, and they're just sort of chasing this dream of becoming wealthy and powerful. And I think that's really different than the innovation that you have in other places. I live in Amsterdam and we have a lot of innovation here too. But in a way, I just think it's sort of more well intentioned. But I think that that's also because we're a more social ecosystem. I mean, in Amsterdam, we have things like social capitalism and social safety nets. We have socialized healthcare. We understand why we need to take care of each other, right? We don't want to be like Silicon Valley because it doesn't take more than just a visit to the San Francisco Bay Area to see all of the drug addicted homeless people that are wandering around. I mean, there's a reason why Douglas Rushkoff, wrote a book called Throwing Rocks at the Google Bus. It's just the amount of wealth inequality that's been perpetuated by the Silicon Valley types, right? And even Paul Graham from Y Combinator, he wrote a very controversial blog post saying, I am the creator of wealth inequality, or I should say income inequality. And, eventually, of course, a lot of people reacted to the post and he didn't take it down, but I think he kind of like heavily, annotated it to try and say what kind of a point he was trying to make. But it's not like these people don't know what they're doing, right? And the problem is that business really just has become this kind of vehicle for moving capital around, and it's very effective. And this is, to a certain extent, the reason why the rest of the world has copied the Silicon Valley style, speculative means of, business as sort of, vehicles for speculative trade on equity rather than actually creating businesses for really just like creating things in the real economy. I mean, back in the old days, with things like AT&T, they used to have AT&T Bell Labs, and they did huge amounts of research, uh, you know, um, which also created innovations. And nowadays, I mean, the actual R&D budget, I mean, they'll do it if they think that they can sort of speculate on the equity, but actually really taking a long-term perspective towards building the technology itself, that's kind of disappeared, I think. People don't create stuff if they think they can't monetize it within, 3 to 5 years, 10 at most. So, it's changed and it's not helping society. We're basically creating a company that puts the interests of shareholders over human interest. And it's really led us into the unstable world that we're in right now. I mean, with all of the environmental issues, with all of the political issues, with the polarization, with the degradation of our democracies. I mean, people are cashing on this. And I mean, I hate to say it, but I mean, I think this is what, the incarnation of Silicon Valley over the last 20, 30 years has led us to.
Mm. One thing that I'm curious is when we talk about ethical technology, if somebody was to present the argument that, okay, if someone's willing to buy a product, it must mean that I'm serving some utility for them because they are willing to buy it, whether it's actually useful for them or not. So outside of using that metric of are people willing to buy my product, how is it that someone can think about the construction of their technology or whatever product it is that they're building in maybe a different lens? And how do I get as many people to use this as possible?
Yeah, but if that's your measure, whether or not people will buy it, then every fentanyl dealer is ethical.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, you
exactly.
can you can certainly
So
sell
how,
people things that's bad for them, and they might want it because they've grown addicted to it. But it doesn't mean that it's good for anyone.
yeah. So then what would be like a better measurement?
I think that right now, most of the problems in the world are happening because companies are externalizing their costs onto society and the planet for the benefit of shareholders who are basically extracting the value out of the enterprise. I think that if you were to eliminate the financial extraction out of the enterprises, then I think that would fundamentally realign the incentives. Because if nobody was going to extract money beyond a middle class salary and a pension out of a business, then why does that business exist? At that point, really, I think the only reason left, the only purpose, a reason for being of that company left is just to have a positive impact. And at that point, then, that positive impact, it doesn't need to be anything lofty or sustainable development goals or anything like that, but just, at that point, basically providing a product or service that has enough of a value proposition that people want to spend money for it. But that's sort of the difference. I mean, if people would still provide that product or service, even if they were not extracting cash for themselves, then probably what you're selling is reasonably, something that's beneficial. Whereas if people are selling that product or service, but the main reason they're doing it is because they're just trying to maximize their own personal wealth, that is sort of what opens the door to having people sell things, I think, that are harmful. So I really think that that's the distinguishing factor. Are people financially extracting or aren't they? And it leads to very subtle differences in business, right? I mean, if you were to build a social and, sort of a social media company, I mean, I just heard the other day that I think Mastodon is going to become steward owned, which is amazing, which basically sort of means that, they're altering their business model in such a way to divide up governance, basically voting rights from profit rights. And of course, a step further you can go is also to completely lock up those profit rights. And they're basically just trying to make sure that whoever controls the company also can't get rich from the company. And it's precisely these kinds of modifications that allow a company to, make decisions purely based on what is in the best interest of the ecosystem. Whether that's the customers, whether that's the staff, whether that's society surrounding the whole thing. But that's a huge difference from Facebook, where, of course, Mark Zuckerberg has super voting constructions, ensuring that he will perpetually remain, the ruler of Meta. And really, he has so many voting rights that there's just no way to depose him. So he's basically completely unaccountable. He's unaccountable to his staff. He's unaccountable to the shareholders. And he's not even accountable really, to society at large. I mean, at this point, anyway, he's just trying to curry political favor with Trump at the moment, to just try and ensure he can continue doing what he's doing with impunity. Yeah.
Hmm. I mean, you brought up a lot of, I had like different things I wanted to pinpoint and like move off of for different things that you said. And I'm really curious about this incentive thing that you were talking about, because do you feel like how businesses have been run, at least if we can talk about maybe the context of the United States, it's been like that since, Carnegie, Rockefeller, or was that something that has changed over time, do you think? This kind of prioritization of extracting wealth rather than really caring about the product or the end user or the people who are actually consuming it.
Well, Carnegie and Rockefeller were monopolists. So, in that sense, but at least their monopolies were based around the real economy, because they were still, trading in things like steel, for example, which was leading to actual products that people needed. And in that sense, I mean, they also had business models. Of course, they were externalizing costs by underpaying people, by stripping natural resources from the environment. They attempted to launder their reputations afterwards by philanthropically giving back, of course. But yeah, I think monopolies, that concept, yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot older than Silicon Valley, the Silicon Valley model, because I mean, I think Silicon Valley as such, the whole creative, Schumpeterian creative destruction, I don't think this is older than maybe, 50 years roughly. Because I think that, the VCs, I think a lot of it started from, I think William Shockley, if I remember correctly. And, also, people really, the way that we also started incubating companies, this also started from, like Nolan Bushnell from Atari, who, had his fortune from the video game company, but then sort of decided that he wanted to create a number of spin off a number of his own ideas, and sort of the maximizing the number of exits was sort of his, and thus multiplying his money the most was sort of the way that he could do this. I mean, that's relatively new thinking, because I mean, business itself is fine. Like, business is the fundamental unit of human organization. We've had businesses forever. Because I mean, businesses are basically essentially nothing more than people getting together to make something happen in a financially self-sustaining way. And even with finance and money, I mean, money is nothing more than just a abstraction. It's just like, an agreement. It's a human agreement. So, the actual buying and selling of things and the markets, I mean, these are fairly neutral concepts, right? And, if that's sort of our definition of capitalism, then it's been around for a long time, and there's absolutely no problem with it. But I think the problem indeed is sort of when you do start concentrating things just into a smaller set of hands. I mean, I guess, I'm not sure exactly where it started, but I mean, we certainly saw it with medieval feudalism. And, ultimately, I mean, it, led to, the Industrial Revolution and some of the monopolists from there, which ultimately led to our sort of capital-led Silicon Valley ecosystem now. But yeah, there's been really good books that have been written on this stuff. So, I mean, in that sense, I think also I'd mentioned Douglas Rushkoff before in Throwing Rocks at the Google Bus, but he actually lists quite a bit about the development of capitalism. I think David Graeber has also written about this topic, and quite a number of others. So, yeah, I mean, this stuff didn't come from nowhere, but it did take a while to evolve. But at the same time, like back when my grandfather was young, I mean, he was basically, he started basically as a soldier on warships during World War II. And he'd studied optometry, so he was actually making glasses for the US soldiers. I think they were in Italian waters at the time, if I recall correctly. Anyway, at a certain point, World War II ended, and basically they came back to the US, and then he basically opened up his own optometrist shop. And of course, that was basically just, making glasses for people. So, I mean, he was an entrepreneur. He did pretty well, as an entrepreneur, not spectacularly, but, he was doing okay for himself. And I can remember around the point after he'd retired, he joined this US based organization that was called SCORE, which is basically this sort of, I don't remember exactly what it stands for, but it was basically this corpse of retired business people that were essentially meant to help the next generation figure out how to run a profitable business. And they actually helped them with things like, this is how you do your bookkeeping, and this is how you bring in more money than you're spending, and this is how you might market it, and this is how you get a shop on Main Street. I mean, it sounds really old fashioned, but that's sort of how people taught others to do business, back in those days. It was about running a profitable business. You had to bring in more money from customers than you were spending. It was simple math, right? But we've moved so far away from that, because now, the education that new business people are receiving, from these startup incubators is rather, here's how you here's how you get seed capital, here's how you scale exponentially, here's how you sell your company. And that's just completely different, because it's not about even building the business. It's about the exit. Your definition of success is exiting the company, is selling the company. It's not actually building a viable business, or actually serving the
Mm.
community while you're doing so. So just the entire set of ideals, has changed. So, in that sense, I mean, the way that we did things earlier, wasn't so bad. And truthfully speaking, anyway, we still have that very much in our economy. I mean, but we don't acknowledge it, because anyway, over 99% of businesses are small and medium enterprises or family businesses, and they're also the ones that are really supporting the economy, that are providing most of the daily needs that we have, whether it's food or plumbing or haircuts. That's the real economy. Those are the people that are really keeping our societies running. And it's completely separated from this whole financialized neoliberal thing, where basically, equity is the business model, and whatever product or service you do is just sort of like a charade to get people to trade in the equity. That's completely different. So, in that sense, I think we just need to go back to our basics with business, and just like understand the fact that, like, businesses should be profitable, and those profits should be made off of the products and services, that we're selling. Why is this so complicated?
Mm. Do you feel like when you built your own computer security company, one, what was the motivation and incentive behind that? And then two, you noticed all these problems that were happening around you. How did you try to navigate that and lead your business slightly differently or very differently?
Right. So, I mean, I started my company, Radically Open Security, out of discontent for the way that the leaders in the cybersecurity industry were behaving. A lot of cybersecurity companies, they were, hacking activists, they were selling surveillance systems to developing countries. And then when the hacker community called them on it and said, "Hey, could you stop doing that?" Did they stop? No, they just sold that part of the company. So, they also sell 0 days to nation states for the purpose of cyber warfare. I mean, 0 days are basically vulnerabilities in software that haven't yet been disclosed. And it's basically weapons trade. So, I just can't get on board with that. And a lot of other people I know that work in cybersecurity also can't. And anyway, the hacker community is super idealistic. It has a whole lot in common with the open source community. So, in that sense, I was able to pick up that, a lot of hackers were not happy about the choice of employers that were available. And so basically, yeah, the discontent in the hacker community. So I kind of knew that the hacker community really wasn't happy with the situation. Also, I noticed that some of the market leaders in cybersecurity also were acting like black boxes. I experienced it myself also when I was working at the cybercrime team at ING Bank. And, that was sort of when I asked around, and also other customers were not really happy with the lack of openness and transparency in their cybersecurity vendors, and also in the vendor lock-in of these kinds of black boxes. But then, when I asked them, "Are you happy?" they were like, "Well, no, but what's the alternative?" So I kind of realized at the time that both the customers weren't happy and the staff weren't happy. So that kind of like presented a hole in the market. And that's when I left ING Bank at the time to create Radically Open Security. So, but, when I first started it, I wanted to create a social enterprise in the cybersecurity space. But of course, when you say social enterprise these days, what does that even mean? Because, social enterprise these days just seems like a layer of green or social marketing on top of the usual toxic business models. So basically, I figured that, well, I can do a couple things to try and sort of remove some of this profit motive from my business. The first thing that I did was I decided to make my company unsellable. So I basically started out by basically selling my company for €1 to a foundation. Worst sale ever, of course. But the reason why I did this was because I wanted to ensure that the company would never be sold. Of course, it took me years later of learning about things like, steward ownership to also understand that I needed to also add golden shares and other kinds of asset locks, really to complete that process. But that was where I started. And then I also used this sort of church business model thing, which was a fiscal construction called the Fiscal Fundraising Institution, FFI, which is this obscure tax construction from the Dutch church that forces basically entrepreneurs to donate 90% of their profits to charity. And the last 10% is your cash flow buffer. So, and that sort of seemed like, well, it's making this, company so non-commercial that, it's completely obvious that, we're not doing this for the money. So I was really just, as soon as I'd heard about this fiscal fundraising institution construction, it really gripped me because I got the idea in my head of, oh, but I can create a not-for-profit company. And that idea like gripped me and didn't let me go. So I knew that I had to do this with my company. Otherwise, I would regret it for the rest of my life. I just had to explore this and see what it can become. Of course, when I told people I wanted to run a company that gave away 90% of its profits to charity, everybody thought I was crazy or lying. But of course, they were confused because, they didn't realize I said giving away 90% of my profits, not 90% of my revenue. If I gave away 90% of my revenue, I could close my doors tomorrow. But, With profits, I mean, profit isn't calculated until after my customers have paid me, until after all of my subcontractors have been paid, until after I've reinvested everything I need for growth and stability of the company, right? And we have a lot of overhead. We have a project management team, we have IT and infrastructure, we have a finance department, we have biz dev and sales and marketing, right? This all needs to be paid. And it's only, we can even create we can even create reserves, if we know a big expenditure is coming up for next year. Like if I know that we need to migrate to a new data center, right? I can create a reserve for this. It's then and only then that the profits are calculated. And then 90% of that goes to charity. And then the other 10%, again, accrues year on year as our cash flow buffer. And yeah, so we've managed to grow a thriving business. Our radically open security is now 10 years old. We have 50 staff members, and on top of that, we've donated over 1 million euros to the NLNet Foundation, who is our chosen charity. And, they are a charitable foundation that donates money to open source projects, digital rights initiatives, and anything for an open internet. And they've been doing this for probably 35 years, maybe. Historically, they were actually the first ISP of the Netherlands, and then they got acquired by our national telco, basically the company that's now known as KPN. But rather than cashing out, the founders instead decided to put that into a foundation instead, so it could basically give away all that money for as long as possible. And one of the co-founders actually
Mm.
recently got knighted, got admitted into our Order of the Lion, Frances Brazier. And of course, it was a woman, who was part of making the decision to do this. But yeah, but in either case, yeah. So we've been donating, year on year to this charity. We're reinvesting most of it though, just into really building a good company. For the rest, the other ways that we're a social enterprise, we give cybersecurity services at cost price on a zero margin basis to nonprofits, NGOs, and civil society organizations. Also, because they have cybersecurity needs, sometimes civil society has the world's scariest attacker model, nation states after them, and almost no budget. So we also can sort of, we use commercial customers to get the flywheel spinning, but once it's spinning, we can also serve the smaller guys as well at a nice soft price that they can afford. So, and that's sort of another way that we try
Mm.
to deliver impact. And then beyond that, I guess the last thing that we do is basically our peek over our shoulder pen testing methodology, where we basically try to bring as much openness and transparency into the pen testing process as possible. So we work in online chat rooms and we actually invite customers to watch us while we're busy breaking their stuff. We do this basically to optimize for knowledge transfer and really to transfer the hacker mindset as much as possible, because security is a long-term process and a mindset, and it's not just a set of patches that you get from a pen test report. So in such a way, we're really trying to include them in the
Mm.
process as much as possible, just so they can internalize as much of what we're doing as possible, so they can hopefully not make some of the same stupid mistakes again in the future. And that's I think also just kind of a value, a kind of social value that we also provide even to our the most commercial of our customers.
I like this point that you brought up here where their focus is often on developing the mindset. There's someone that I've been working with for a long time, and something he's brought up as of late recently to me is like, one day I want to be able to do what you do. I remember I said that once. I worked as a consultant for this teaching organization, and on the very first day on my interview, I told the guy who had run the whole thing, I was like, one day I want to do what you do. But it was very clear the way he was, talking to me, that that was not his intention. His intention was not to like bestow upon me the wisdom to also one day do what he does, because he needs to make sure I don't have that, so I don't do what he does, And so it was really interesting where, what is your thoughts on that? Because you have to truly care about the betterment of just people in general to be like, I want to also pass this knowledge forward, even if it may, even one day you may be able to actually get to where I am and then you no longer need me. Does that thought of like if I help people in these ways, maybe they won't need me anymore. Does that thought ever come up? And if so, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, part of the problem that I had was with sort of vendor lock-in of the companies in the industry. And really, precisely what I'm attempting to do is to sort of break their dependence, really educate them as much as possible. I mean, we need to be realistic about this, of course. I mean, you can't, when I'm working with hackers that have, 10 years of experience, 20 years of experience, I mean, you can't learn that just by watching, them do an assignment or two. If only it were that easy. But at the same time, I mean, it certainly doesn't hurt, to at least try and lift the curtains, so they can sort of at least see some of the tools. At worst, it can give them a starting point for their own journeys and their own explorations, and customers like being treated that way. They like being educated. They don't like being kept in the dark. And this is also part of how we got some pretty great customers. I mean, I hadn't mentioned the customers already, but we've had hundreds, that have included, Google and the European Commission and the Dutch Energy Grid and banks and insurance companies, telcos, hosting providers, core internet, software shops, SMEs, startups, and also these, the nonprofits, NGOs, and civil society organizations. And we don't get customers like Google for no reason. It's precisely because they like the openness and transparency with which we're working. Our staff also really likes it too. They don't like keeping our customers in the dark. They like to be able to optimally help. People like to help. People most of the time are good. If they receive the opportunity to do something either in the right way or in the wrong way, and they're getting paid roughly the same, I mean, the choice is obvious. So, in that sense, I mean, yes, I mean, I do believe very much, in the goodness of humanity. I think most of the time when people, are presented with certain choices, I mean, obviously they need to not be in dire straits. I mean, you still have Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? I mean, you still need, um, to have a roof over your head and food on the table, and you need to take care of your kids. I mean, obviously, these kinds of basics need to be taken care of. But with social enterprise, when you're doing it right, you're paying people fairly, because if you're not paying people fairly, it's not a social enterprise. It's not social, which is another really large misconception that I think people both within the social enterprise and outside of the social enterprise industry also have, just thinking that we have to be some kind of martyrs and we have to structurally underpay people. No, like, that's just ensuring that we're never going to be successful on the market. That's not how things work. So, yeah. So, in that sense, I think also ethics has market value. I think it also is part of how we've grown as quickly as we have as a company, given the fact that we're bootstrapped. I mean, over the last 10 years, we work for a lot of very large corporations, and the chief information security officers were frequently ideologically aligned because they were members of the hacker community, and they fought and navigated the bureaucracies within their own companies to get us in the door. And that's the thing. I mean, ethics has market value. Who knew, right? Well, actually, a lot of people knew, because otherwise they wouldn't be greenwashing. I mean, the fact that commercial companies are greenwashing is evidence that ethics has market value, because they're trying to fake it. And that can work. That can be, effective. But I mean, being truly ethical, people can sniff out greenwashing. I mean, particularly younger people. They've got a pretty finely tuned antenna for these things these days. And really, the only way, I think, really to ensure that what you're doing is really social is to put your money where your mouth is. You can't just apply ethics or green or social like a band-aid on top of a toxic business model. It doesn't work that way. It's the same thing with cybersecurity. We have the tenet in cybersecurity of secure by design. You can't create something that's inherently insecure and then slap a security band-aid on it and then you think it's secure. That's not how it works.
Hmm.
And it's the same thing with ethics. You can't take this inherently unethical thing with a toxic business model and then slap a CSR, corporate social responsibility band-aid on it and then think now suddenly that's ethical too. No, that's not how it works. It has to have ethics by design.
Mm. So have you given talks or lectures at business schools presenting this kind of, I mean, are they talking about these type of things in business schools?
Yes. Yes, I have. And even more so, I created a brand new class at the University of Amsterdam Business School called Post Growth Entrepreneurship. That's basically sort of teaching students, well, a little bit about new economics, but more so how to use entrepreneurship as entrepreneurs to build, the post growth, degrowth, donut economics, economies. But really, the most important piece, though, is just financial non-extraction, and really teaching people what are the problems with financial extraction, why is it there, how is it operating, and most importantly, how do we get rid of it? Because, it's one thing to complain about the system. Everybody complains about the system. But then if you ask people, like, how does the system work? Like, what are the pieces? How do they fit together? How do they move and interact? People don't know. People can't tell you those kinds of details. But you need, like any good hacker, I mean, you need to, if you see a system, you need to understand how to disassemble it, and you need to understand the pieces, and you need to even try and figure out ways in which you can put it back together, maybe incorrectly. I mean, we need to know as hackers where to wedge the ice pick, to get that system to behave in ways that perhaps right now it's not being used for. And that's kind of what I'm looking for with post growth entrepreneurship. To put this in different terms, I mean, it's applying systems thinking to basically business and finance and the startup ecosystem. And we're really looking for leverage points, as described by Danella Meadows in her excellent book, Thinking in Systems. We are looking for points at which we can affect the maximum amount of change with the minimum amount of effort. And it turns out that there are quite some leverage points in business and finance, and not so shockingly, one of those largest leverage points is financial incentives. you know, I mean, there's a reason why governments, if they want to get certain behaviors from businesses, that they try to use some kind of financial stimulus to get this behavior to happen, whether it's a subsidy or a tax break or procurement benefits, right? They're trying to encourage the kind of behavior because they realize that, if you view a system as a kind of a state machine, right? As a kind of a decision tree where basically, the world, can either go in this branch or it can take that branch, but then there's basically a weight, value, a numerical weight that sort of decides, probabilistically speaking, is it more likely to take this branch or is it more likely to take that branch? And of course, you can simulate entire systems this way. And really, those leverage points, those financial weights, that is the financial incentives. And as you start to, turn the knobs on the financial incentives, then you start organically, emergently getting different outcomes from the system. If you think about it, this isn't so shocking.
Mm.
But the thing is, not everybody understands what those leverage points are, and they're not always easy to find. I mean, I think that, financial incentives in business, things like the exits, right? The exits, and governance structures are the ways that you can correct this. By indeed, utilizing tools like asset locks and golden shares, you can actually start to do things like lock the value of the company inside the company to really ensure that that company can be the best possible company that it can be and provide the best quality products and services, as it's supposed to, being a business. So, you can fix these things. It requires will, of course, to do so. And in order for there to be will, we need success stories and case studies and role models. And, we need to put the people on a podium who are already doing this. And there are people already doing this. I mean, there's an entire steward
Mhm.
ownership community, which is thousands upon thousands of people, or I should say businesses worldwide, that are using these kinds of governance structures inside their companies. And it shouldn't be so shocking that, if you want to fix capitalism, how do we do this? Well, we do it with good governance of our businesses. I mean, that's so logical, right? And even with finance, I mean, of course we there is capital and it needs to move around and we need to place it in the right places, but we also need to look at the financial incentives for the fund managers who are choosing where that money goes. And they're extracting too, because they're typically the way that they extract is through fees. There's basically a fee structure that's known as the 220, which is pervasive throughout pretty much the entire finance industry. So this is basically a 2% asset under management fee and 20% of what's called carried interest. I'll explain what this means. So basically, for carried interest, if I'm a venture capitalist and you're my portfolio company, if you grow exponentially and exit, I get 20% of that. And that is a really powerful motivator for me as a venture capitalist to push you, my portfolio company, to have, hyper growth and sell the company. That's logical. So the carried interest embeds the growth imperative into startups. And if you think about it, it doesn't, require a huge leap of logic to realize that if you want to get rid of the growth imperative from companies, it really is as simple as eliminating the carried interest from the compensation structure of the fund managers. um, but this is a tough
Would
sell
that
to fund
also
managers.
would that also be reducing the incentive for VCs to invest as much money?
Um, well, VCs don't invest money. VCs collect money from limited partners, who's their customers. That's basically where the money comes from. And then basically what the fund managers are doing
Mm.
is they're allocating that money. Look, the 2% is for the most part actually how they're earning their money, because when a pension fund gives money to a venture capitalist, generally the venture capitalist will charge 2%, for the pension fund for having the grand pleasure, of having them uh, manage the money and basically try and maximize the returns. Most of the time, anyway, 85% of VCs can't even keep pace with the stock market. So, I mean, most of what VCs promise is hot air, anyways. Literally, if you just buy an index fund and hold it, you do better than 85% of most VCs. But the thing is, you can't even determine or judge the behavior of venture capitalists until 10 years later, right? Until you've actually seen how the portfolio companies have done. And that takes time. And of course, by the end of those 10 years, they can just take their 2% management fees and go retire to some Caribbean island and, sip coconuts on the beach or something. But the point is that, the 2%, if you're a small fund manager, doesn't amount to much. But if you're a larger fund manager with a billion in assets under management or higher, that very quickly becomes BlackRock. And if you're somebody like BlackRock, I'm sorry, if you're somebody like BlackRock, it's completely ridiculous. So the point here is that it doesn't have to be that extractive. I mean, you could just have management fees that basically support the operations of the business, assuming middle class salaries and a pension. And this isn't as crazy as it sounds. There are fund managers who are already doing this, like, Daniela Barone Suarez from Snowball Impact Management in London. She's reformed this extractive 220 to get rid of the carried interest and also to change the 2% into the cost of running the business, assuming middle class salaries and a pension, right? Because God forbid fund managers be middle class, you know. But she's doing this. She's gotten knighted too, by the way. Anyway, but the point
When you
here.
say knighted, sorry, I'm a little sorry. I just sorry. I wanted to just when you say knighted, I'm not fully sure about that reference.
Oh,
What do you
she
mean
was
by that?
admitted to the Order of, I think, the Order of the British Empire, OBE. So anyway,
Okay.
like in England, in the UK,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah. So like if you're knighted, you become like a part of the royal family. Not part of it, but I don't know. What is that?
oh,
They put you on
you're
a
just
wall or something?
recognized. You're just recognized. Look, I don't know the
Okay.
details. this stuff, and I have nothing
It's
to
like
do
the
with
Hall of Fame. It's like
romance.
the Hall of Fame in a
Yeah, it
sports
means you
league.
probably did something right. So, anyway, doesn't matter. Point is, they're getting recognition for this stuff, and and they're also successful with it too. So, so the point here is that you know so they're creating basically these funds that show that you can do it differently. I mean, same thing also with Purpose Ventures from the Purpose Foundation in Germany. They too are running their funds as steward owned co-ops, I believe. They also have been reforming their fee structures as well. And on top of that, like, driving fees down to zero. I mean, it actually all started with John Bogle. And John Bogle, he was the inventor of the index fund. And he used to talk a lot about the financial conflict of interest between basically the fund managers and the investors. And by investors, he actually meant like pensioners and retail investors, basically people like us. Um, so, and he thought fees were too high. And what he wanted to do was create a kind of investment product that essentially was completely automated and just tracked a stock market index and that essentially drove fees practically down to zero. Now, when he first started and, invented this index fund, people thought he was crazy. They originally called it Bogle's Folly. I mean, Bogle's Folly, really? I mean, because of course, all these years later, I mean, I believe that, I think 35% of all investment worldwide is passive investment, basically either index funds or their superset of exchange traded funds, ETFs, right, which are basically just these fully automated investment products with low fees. And there's even been some fund managers who have literally charged zero fees for some of these stock index trackers. Like I think Prudential had one that had 0% fees. I mean, I think it was a loss leader for their other products, but literally he succeeded. And on top of that, the company that he started, Vanguard, became one of the three largest asset management firms in the world, on the planet. So I mean, clearly he got his his last laugh there. But John Bogle was basically trying to create a financially non-extractive, essentially almost a not-for-profit investment fund. So, I mean, this stuff sounds really weird, but it has a storied legacy. I mean, if you actually know the history.
Mm. A lot of it comes back to, I think, something you had mentioned earlier, like the middle class lifestyle and a pension. And defining, I think, even as I go about my career and build the things that I want to build, a lot of the question is like, how much money do I need? There's like one thing of how much money do I need to like portray myself as like wealthy and the portrayal aspect of how much you need is very different than what you actually need. But identifying what you actually need can be so hard when the only way you've ever identified it is through comparative measures. And that's, I think, been really interesting, especially when you're like, okay, well, everyone I'm around goes to private school and this and that. And then all of a sudden, now what it means to just be able to have enough is actually so absurdly high that it's no longer to live that type of lifestyle, you would need so much more money. But it's because comparatively you're around people who've normalized that form of lifestyle. And I see that happening all the time in the Bay, where a lot of people who are bringing in so much money still feel like they're not making enough money because their lifestyle is and the people around them are at such a level that everything that they do is also expensive, from their piano classes and their every aspect of it. All of a sudden their expenses have now become so high. So a part of this journey is also keeping your expenses low to some extent, so you don't need to do these extractive measures to like be able to support yourself and your family, right?
No, I don't think so. Look, I mean, I think
Why not?
a large part of it is sort of social safety nets, and some of that can be facilitated by the government, and some of it can be informally. I mean, you also have developing countries where basically you have communities who take care of themselves, and the quality of the food that they eat is much higher than typically what you would get in the United States. I mean, it's not like there's necessarily dollar values that are attached to security. I mean, a lot of it really is just in our communities and in our informal economies, and there's a real poverty of that in particularly in cities in the United States. I mean, part of the reason why people want to hoard is because they are afraid, because if they fall, there's no social safety net to catch them. We're all individualistic. We
Hmm.
live opposite ends of the country oftentimes as our parents, because we're just moving around to chase the jobs and the employment opportunities. And yeah, I mean, for the rest, the healthcare system, I mean, if you get sick, you're probably going to be bankrupted. I mean, even if you have health insurance, I mean, God save you if you accidentally go to an out of network provider, I mean, and you can run up these incredibly huge bills. I mean, this whole tendency to hoard is a scarcity mindset. And there's a scarcity mindset in the United States because I think in part because the government does not provide the safety or the social security that people need to be able to feel like if they fall that there's a society there to catch you. And, in the Netherlands, I started Radically Open Security living in Amsterdam. And the Netherlands has an excellent social safety net. And I knew that, okay, I've got about enough money saved up that I can probably do this for about 2 years, roughly, before I have to quit and get a real job. Right. But I knew that if I failed, and I also knew that if I got sick, that no problem. I mean, the Dutch social systems would catch me. I would have my health care taken care of. I would, get welfare. And then basically, I mean, yeah, it would suck that my company didn't work out, but then I could just basically get up again, brush myself off, and then go get a job. I mean, that was basically the worst case scenario. So I don't have to worry because I'm not in a situation of scarcity. And that's precisely the reason why, people in the Netherlands, I mean, we don't have, salaries that are anywhere near as high as the Bay Area, nowhere near. But we feel better about things. We have, again, good social safety nets. We also have work-life balance. I mean, most of us, work 40-hour weeks. Some people even work 36-hour weeks, or even less. I know people who work 4-day weeks. And it's just a good lifestyle. We have good infrastructure, we have bike paths, we have excellent public transportation, we have safe food and water, and it's just a really great place to live. And that's things that they don't have in the Bay Area. And in that sense, I mean, I don't think, I mean, also the other thing is like with the prices of housing in the Bay Area, I mean, I know a Stanford professor who just left because she couldn't afford to live in the Bay Area anymore. But the problem is, Silicon Valley, it runs off of the sort of, fake economy. Basically, this financialized economy, it's not part of the real economy anymore. So, I mean, yes, you can pull down a salary of maybe 200,000, 300,000 if you're a really great software developer at one of these tech companies, but they're not actually paying for this by selling products or services. I mean, mostly they're just, getting this money from the stock market. And that basically allows them essentially to, via modern monetary theory, to basically just be able to create cash out of thin air. It's the same thing as creating a cryptocurrency. I mean, a cryptocurrency has no inherent worth, but it's only worth what people will agree to pay for it. So if I create a Melanie coin, my Melanie coin is worth as much as, you are willing to trade, in cash for it. And that's why, when you look at cryptocurrencies, whether it's, Bitcoin or Ethereum, a single tweet from Elon Musk, can send the thing sailing or plummeting. It's just because it's completely subjective, right? And it's entirely just based on perceptions and crowd behavior and hype cycles. And, it's not based on anything real. It has no actual inherent value in the world. And to be honest, corporate equity is the same. It's basically that same kind of creation of a kind of artificial thing. Like what is a share of stock, really? You know, I mean, you can create an unlimited number of them. I mean, yes, you'll wind up diluting the value of other people, you know, if you create more of them because a company has a particular valuation, um, which may or may not change, you know, when you create these stock. It's the same thing also with creation of currencies on the macroeconomic level. Like, you know, the U.S. Treasury can just print more dollars, and you know, we've got all kinds of debt, you know, to China. Well, no worries. We just like hit a few buttons in a computer, and voila, there's our cash. I mean, that's modern monetary theory. I mean, can you, you know, I mean, don't people ever wonder like how it is that we suddenly conjured up trillions during the pandemic, you know, to be able to give payouts to people and to businesses, you know? I mean, because it's funny because, of course, you know, the moment that we want to roll out social services, things like a universal basic income or even better healthcare, people are like, oh, but where do we get the money from? Where do we find the money, right? We need to raise taxes. And of course, nobody wants to raise, you know, nobody wants to pay more taxes. So everybody's against it. But then, of course, the moment that an investment bank needs to get bailed out, you know, or there's a pandemic and we need to helicopter money, you know, to various people, suddenly, you know, we turn on the printing presses in the central bank and suddenly that money magically appears. I mean, yes, it can, you know, create inflation. It doesn't have to, but it can. And of course, in the last period of time, the inflation has been the really the price that we've paid for the that money creation during the pandemic. You know, but if we had given more of that money to the people and less of that money to businesses, it might have been worth it. But all of this is acts of political will. And the problem that the United States has is that it, at the moment, has no political will to use the financial system to reduce economic inequality. Just and this is not even a partisan issue. Both the left and the right are guilty of this. You know, I mean, it was Obama that bailed out the investment banks. Let's not forget this. So, you know, but we're also, you know, entering a time. You know, of course, the inauguration of Trump now, as of this recording, is a week away. You know, we're about to have two investors leading the country: a real estate investor and a former venture capitalist. I mean, if anyone is going to liberalize rules and legislation and policy for investors, I mean, they're going to do it. You know, and even fewer restrictions on capital. Again, it's going to benefit the investor class, and it's going to come at the cost of everyone else. And I think that's scary. Because I mean, you know, it's this kind of economic inequality, it's this kind of inflation, it's this kind of economic desperation, and people can see, you know, that they're falling behind. The new generations are worse off than their parents. These were the conditions that led to World War One. These were the conditions, you know, that also eventually led us to World War II. You know, we're entering an incredibly destabilized time, and I don't mean to you know. Be all, you know, it's not that I'm trying to scare anyone, but it's more just that I'm nervous myself about this. You know, we're entering these unprecedented times, and yeah, but you know, some people really made a lot of money, but I mean, but this price that's going to be paid, I have no idea what's going to happen. We have to wait and see.
Mm. Well, I know you're really busy and you have a lot of meetings coming up, but I wanted to say thank you first for sharing all your insights. And there were a lot of things I wanted to sit and think about that you shared. And so I really appreciate you for your time.
Yeah, no, of course. But just one last comment though is I'm not trying to sound alarmist here. I don't want to end on that on that note. I
Mm,
mean, really, you know, I think that there's a lot that we can do, you know, and I want to sort of give people a hopeful message. And I think that actually where we can move to, you know, the differences that we can make, you know, are to embrace, you know, financially non-extractive businesses and financial institutions. We can realign incentives in ways that are systemic to be able to get these organically better outcomes, you know, to decrease wealth inequality, you know, to be able to help stabilize, basic products and services for people in ways that are safe and in ways that are responsible. And I think that also
Mm,
these kinds of alternative governance structures are things that have barely been tried. I mean, there's been a bit with cooperatives, but I think cooperatives also they get you part of the way there by trying to have stakeholder governance, but they still have profit rights, even if they're distributed amongst the stakeholders. So basically, the stakeholders can collude to extract. But I think that forms of steward ownership that have strong asset locks and golden shares, this has not really been tried very much yet. So, I hope that we can give people some amount of hope with this, that there are tools that we can try to deploy. Even if you're not an entrepreneur, you can support the ecosystem by working for companies like this. If you work for a corporate or a multinational or a government, you can procure from companies like this. You can have, in that sense, social procurement policies that set out criterion for these kinds of things. I mean, there really is a lot that we can do. And people just need to understand that they need to reframe business as a form of activism, right? They can reframe business as a vehicle for their spirituality, or business as a mixed media for art, right? Or business as a vehicle for creative expression. You can do any of these things, but it just really depends on how you choose to look at business. And I think this is the part that needs to change, but I think that it requires education. And I think that, slowly the narrative is shifting. The fact that we have this post growth entrepreneurship class in the University of Amsterdam Business School, I think that makes a difference. The fact that we have incubators also, like nonprofit ventures that are pumping out these kinds of startups with these kinds of business models. This also helps, and things are moving in this direction. And we just, I think, need to keep an optimistic look on things, and we need to try and also understand that this isn't a partisan issue, and that we also hopefully can bridge our political divides even, to try and find consensus, because I do believe that people both on the left and the right do care about economic inequality, and they do want to make the world better.
mm. If people want to learn more about the things that you teach and talk about, where can they find your content?
Yeah, so you can find, I think the best place to follow me is on LinkedIn. So you can just look for my name. I'm the only Melanie Rieback out there. Feel free to connect with me. And also, I created some videos, post growth entrepreneurship. It's basically the lecture recording from the business school. Um, it's 11 hours of content. So if you want to learn more, I think it's the best place to look. And this is pinned to the top of my LinkedIn profile.